Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Deku become Ultra Instinct Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. I'm sorry ma'am, but I'm afraid there's no hope for him. Those words were spoken to Izuku Midoryia 10 years ago. That day his mother had taken him to the doctor to be evaluated regarding her concern for his quirk, or rather lack of one. The event would be something that he would never forget, and he would always remember how the conversation went down. This can't be. There has to be some mistake. Inko, his mother, questioned worriedly. Pardon me if this question seems a bit intrusive, but regarding quirks, you are 4th generation, correct? The doctor asked. Inko shook her head in confirmation before responding, why of course. My quirk allows me to pull small objects to myself, and my husband's quirk allows him to breathe fire. At his age he should have displayed either yours or his father's quirk. Furthermore, research has shown that the presence or absence of a joint in the pinky toe indicates whether an individual will manifest a quirk. Those who do possess a quirk lack the extra joint, as they represent the next stage of evolution. However, those that possess 2 joints are typically quirkless. If you direct your attention to this X-ray, here you can see that Izuku has 2 joints. I'm sorry ma'am, but it's more than likely that your son will not manifest a quirk. Those words had crushed him. He always had the desire to become a hero, however to have to try and become one without a quirk made his dream seem unattainable. His quirklessness also gave birth to the bane of his existence. Its name was Katsuki Bakugo. Even before Katsuki had obtained his quirk, he had always been sure of himself, however once he started to manifest his quirk his ego went from being massive to practically unbearable. But for whatever reason unknown to Izuku, Katsuki would single him out. He would never fail to give him hourly reminders of how weak, worthless, and pathetic he was. Even through his nickname Deku, he would be reminded that in Katsuki's eyes along with the eyes of others that he was useless. The torment just didn't stop at the verbal abuse. He would receive frequent beatings from his Katsuki and his cronies. Izuku would do his best to fight back and in some cases surprise his tormentors along with himself, dodging a blow and landing some solid hits. However, the numbers would eventually overwhelm him and he would go home beaten and bruised. His mother would often look horrified as he came home from his bouts with Katsuki, but he would feed her lies so as to not worry her. 10 years after being told that he would most likely not manifest a quirk, his situation had remained stagnant. He still had the dream to be a hero, but it seemed like his dream would remain just that. He was in his final year of junior high and he still didn't have a quirk. Granted, Izuku had been training his body to be stronger and faster to suffice for his lack of a quirk, and his grades were stellar, but he couldn't shake the feeling that as hard as he had worked, it wouldn't be enough. He pushed that thought to the back of his mind. If he wanted to become a hero, he couldn't afford to be pessimistic. The sound of his teacher's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. You guys are all 3rd years now, so it's time we seriously start thinking about your career. Bah, who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes, right? The class answered his question by giving a display of their quirks. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks. But you know the school prohibits the usage of them. The teacher responded, trying to calm the class down. Sensei, don't lump me in with these chumps. Their crappy quirks could never compare to mine. A smug voice called out. Everyone turned their attention to the source of the voice and found that it was none other than Katsuki Bakugo. The class started to berate Katsuki for his rude comment and he in turn responded by dismissing them as extras. Anxious to defuse the situation, the teacher asked the sandy-haired teen, Bakugo, you mentioned that you were applying for the hero course at UA, correct? Everyone within the class started to voice their disbelief of what they just heard. I heard that the acceptance rates for that school were extremely low. You must have a lot of confidence in yourself if you applied there. I mean, your quirk is pretty strong. I'm not surprised. Are you sure you have what it takes? You might as well apply for another school. Getting in there is impossible. Katsuki relished in the criticism and praise he was receiving at that moment. The praise served to inflate his ego, whereas the criticism served as more fuel to go about proving his doubters wrong. He jumped on his desk and exclaimed, I already aced the mock exam, so getting in will be a piece of cake. Soon I'll become the #1 hero, and not to mention become filthy stinking rich. Midoriya, you said that you were also applying for the hero course at UA, right? Suddenly all the eyes in the classroom fixed themselves on Izuku. He had never wanted to have a shrinking quirk more than at that moment. The question posed by the teacher was met with laughter and ridicule. You know, good grades alone can't get you into the UA. What makes you think you can pass the entrance exam? Just because you're a bit stronger and faster than some doesn't mean you can keep up with quirks. Katsuki started to approach Izuku with a cruel smile on his face. 10 years of being bullied gave Izuku foresight on what was coming. Kitsuki slammed his fist on Izuku's desk, a predatory glint in his eyes. Come on Deku. It's one thing to have a crappy quirk than another to be quirkless. What, do you actually think you can hang with me? Izuku thought about this question. Despite being quirkless, he still had a dream to become a hero. Allowing those sleepless nights spent studying and those exhausting days spent training to go in vain because of self-doubt wasn't an option for him. He had put in too much time and effort to let his blood, sweat, and tears go to waste. He still had doubts and acknowledged them, but he would be damned if he allowed them to hinder his progress towards being a hero. He took a deep breath before giving his response. Achin, I have worked hard in pursuit of trying to be a hero. Like you, my goal is to try and become the best. If you're someone I have to surpass to reach the top, then so be it. Silence filled the classroom after Izuku said those words. Even though he meant every word that he said, it didn't make him any less terrified saying it. Truthfully, he was surprised that he hadn't stuttered in his response. As Izuku looked up to meet Kitsuki's eyes, his face turned white. The massive vein was bulging in Kitsuki's forehead and the scowl that was framed caused his face to be littered with wrinkles. Izuku could hear him gritting his teeth in anger at what he said to him. Explosions were popping off in his hands, and he looked ready to attack at any second. Any chance you want to repeat that, you damn nerd? Kitsuki asked through clenched teeth. Izuku knew better than to further antagonize him, so he kept his mouth shut. Eventually, the teacher had Kitsuki return to his seat, but for the rest of the class, Izuku could feel his red eyes bore holes in the back of his head. He knew Kitsuki would try to confront him at the end of class, so once the bell rang for dismissal, he scrambled to try and get out the door. However, Kitsuki was a bit faster and managed to block the doorway before he could leave. You think I would just forget how you disrespected me earlier, Deku? Izuku knew that there wasn't a way for him to escape, so his only option would be to stand his ground and fight. He slid into a fighting stance to get ready to defend himself. Kitsuki's eyes went bloodshot at seeing Izuku stand up to him. He was quirkless, therefore supposed to be underneath his foot. Although Izuku was bashful, he didn't outright cower in front of him like his classmates or teachers. And the fact that he didn't infuriated him. Did quirkless Izuku really think he was better than him? No longer being able to hold back the anger, Kitsuki rushed in and threw a massive right hook at Izuku. However, it was too wide, and Izuku was able to counter with a straight nose. Kitsuki gripped his nose in pain as a warm stream of blood poured from his nostrils. Taking advantage of the situation, Izuku tried to zip around him to escape, however one of Kitsuki's cronies grabbed the back of his collar before he could make the getaway. The lackey proceeded to put Izuku in a full Nelson, but he managed to escape his grip by using the back of his head to deliver a devastating headbutt. A scream of pain pierced the classroom as Izuku tried to escape again. Kitsuki, having somewhat recovered, saw Izuku attempting to flee and tackled him to the ground. Bakugo then started to strike the green-haired teen repeatedly, while on top of him, Izuku barely managed to put up a guard. Izuku's guard eventually broke due to the ferocious blows, and as a result his face became bloodied and bruised. After getting a couple more punches in, Kitsuki held his palm over Izuku's face and released a small explosion. Izuku finally fell unconscious, his face shaded black with streaks of red running down. Kitsuki didn't anticipate the fight taking as much out of him as it did, and as a result he was exhausted. Heavy breaths escaped his lips as he attempted to recover from the fight. The lackey that attempted to stop Izuku earlier offered Kitsuki a hand, seeing his friend in that state. Kitsuki responded by punching him square in the jaw. What the hell was that for? I don't need your damn hand. Also, I don't ever remember asking your ass to interfere in my fight. He was about to escape. Plus he got you good in the nose. I just thought you needed help. It sounds like you're doubting my abilities, and whether you thought I needed help or not is irrelevant. In the end you didn't even do anything. Next time you interfere like that, I'll do more than just punch you. The teacher, having heard all the commotion, made their way to the classroom and saw a bleeding Kitsuki sitting atop an Izuku that was starting to regain consciousness. The two boys found themselves in the principal's office, and it was obvious to both that he was nothing short of livid. The principal slammed his hands on the desk, demanding an explanation as to why the fight occurred. Kitsuki gave his testimony, first saying that earlier in class Izuku had said something which angered him, and he simply wanted to confront Izuku about what was said. He claimed that Izuku started getting ready to attack him before he could say anything, so he had to defend himself. The principal could sense that he was leaving out some information. He slowly massaged his temples and gave a deep sigh. Bakugo, I'm sure you are aware that the use of quirks in school is prohibited. And to use your quirk to attack another student like that puts you on grounds for expulsion. So I hope for your sake that you are telling me the truth. While Kitsuki's face remained unchanged, the principal could see the emotion in his eyes change. While he was giving his side of the story, they shone with confidence, however now they were filled with worry. The principal made a mental note of it and directed his attention towards Izuku. Now that Bakugo has finished providing his perspective of the altercation, would you like to share yours, Midoriya? Izuku swallowed the lump in his throat. This was the first time he found himself in the principal's office, and the thought of getting in trouble terrified him. However, if he told the truth it would result in Katsuki getting expelled. Even though Katsuki treated him harshly, he did not want to be the reason for him failing to reach his dream of becoming a hero. Despite being a prick, Katsuki was undoubtedly a hard worker with drive and ambition, and Izuku knew the pain of being told that his hard work would inevitably be fruitless. He did not want Katsuki to endure the same tribulation, so he fed the teacher the same story that was told to him earlier. Katsuki's eyes widened in surprise, whereas the principal narrowed in deep thought. After a period of silence, the principal said, "This type of behavior is unlike you, Midoriya. With that being said, you should have known better than to provoke Bakugo into engaging in a fight with you. Since this is a first-time offense, I'm going to let you off easy with a week-long lunch detention." That punishment didn't affect Izuku that much, considering he ate by himself anyway. The principal continued to speak. "Bakugo, I apologize for assuming you were the culprit in starting the fight. As of now, you are free to go." Katsuki quickly gathered his things and made his way to and out the door with haste. "Now that Katsuki isn't here, there is no need for you to lie anymore," the principal said. What do you? Do you take me for an idiot, Midoriya? I know without a shadow of a doubt that it was indeed Bakugo that started the altercation. His attitude has proved to be a huge problem for both the staff and students. Not to mention that since you started here you haven't given me any issues at all. So I'm going to ask you again, what happened? It was like I said before. Midoriya, listen, I understand that you don't want to get Bakugo in trouble. However, he hurt you and he hurt you badly. I have a feeling that this hasn't been the first time either, correct? The look in Izuku's eyes promptly gave him the answer. All you need to do is tell me. If you do, I can make sure that he won't harm you again. I just need your cooperation. You're a fine kid, and I would hate for you to suffer through Bakugo's torment if there was something I could do to intervene. Izuku kept his eyes to the floor, not bothering to meet his principal's gaze. He already made his decision. After it became clear that Izuku wasn't going to talk, the principal shot him a disappointed look before dismissing him. Midoriya, be sure to remember that next Monday, lunch detention starts for you. Izuku looked back and nodded in confirmation, before continuing towards the door. As he opened it, the sound of his principal's voice rang out once more. "Oh, and Midoriya, if you ever change your mind, please come back and let me know." The walk home for Izuku had been rather uneventful. After the situation with the principal, he was rather anxious to get home and see his mother. He had made his decision, but he was questioning whether it was the right thing to do. Truth be told, if he did get Katsuki expelled, it would definitely have improved his life. Mentally and physically, he was sure he would be better off. Not to mention the attitude and aggression that Katsuki displayed was unbefitting of a hero anyways. Additionally, with his absence, his cronies would stop picking on him. Then finally, if he was expelled, his classmates would get to see the image Izuku projected of himself and not Katsuki's. That in turn would possibly lead him to making a couple of friends. So just why did he cover for Katsuki? Izuku told himself that it was for the reason he thought of earlier. He really didn't want to be responsible for crushing Katsuki's dream, but to say that was the only reason was a lie. He became embarrassed as he acknowledged the secondary reason, which was him hoping that holding back from expelling Katsuki would get him to like him. It was a childish reason. Him being the optimist he was, had hoped that Katsuki would start to view him as a friend after that deed. However, the more Izuku thought about it, the more he realized the low probability of the plan actually working. As Izuku was kicking himself for being so naive, he began to make his way through a tunnel under an overpass. As he exited the tunnel, he heard a wet squelching sound behind him. As he turned around, his face shifted from confusion to horror as he saw a giant green, wet blob lunge at him and surround itself around his body. Izuku struggled as hard as he could, but it was to no avail. He slowly felt himself suffocating as tears started to stream down his face from the fear and pain. As he was about to lose consciousness, he heard the words, "Texas Smash." The green blob of slime was suddenly blown off him, and he then got a good look at who was responsible. In his view was a man with 2 strands of hair protruding from the top of his head, with a huge smile plastered onto his face. Izuku knew then that it was the #1 hero, All Might, that saved his life. Whether it was from the shock, fear, or exhaustion, Izuku eventually fell to the ground, his vision fading to black. Hey, disoriented Izuku eventually woke up to the sight of All Might repeatedly patting his face. Once his eyes opened, All Might gave a huge sigh of relief. "Thank goodness, for a second I thought we lost you there." Izuku's eyes widened in surprise as he began to grasp who was standing in front of him. I apologize that you got caught up in this incident, All Might began, however your involvement was not in vain, as you have helped me successfully contain the villain. All Might finished, holding up the bottle the villain was contained in for Izuku to see. Izuku was starstruck seeing his idol. Since childhood, he had adored All Might. It was evident in all the miscellaneous All Might paraphernalia he had in his room. It was especially evident in conversation. Izuku knew practically everything about All Might, from his accomplishments, team-ups, nemesis, etc. Izuku fumbled around in his backpack trying to find his notebook so that All Might could sign it. His eyes lit up seeing that All Might had already put his John Hancock on one of the pages. Thank you so much. This item will be treasured for generations to come, Izuku exclaimed, the giddiness in his voice evident. No problem, young man. Now I must take this fellow to the authorities. You can catch me again on TV, All Might exclaimed, getting ready to leave. Why is that Izuku asked, looking disappointed. I'm afraid that a pro's battle is not only limited to enemies. A battle against time is a battle that can easily be lost if one is not vigilant. Izuku still had questions for All Might. Even though he had met his childhood hero, he still couldn't help but feel disappointed from his encounter with the slime villain. For 10 years, Izuku had been diligently training to improve his strength, speed, and his ability to defend himself. However, that 10 years of experience didn't amount to anything when facing the slime villain. He had been overtaken easily and quickly. If he struggled like this now, how would he fare against far stronger and more cunning villains? For the longest time Izuku had pushed the doubts he and others had of him becoming a hero to the back of his mind, but after almost losing his life to the villain he wasn't so sure of himself. Thanks for your support, All Might yelled as he leapt up into the air. However, the pro hero failed to notice that the young boy had latched himself to his leg before he jumped. Please release me, young man. I respect the dedication, but this is a bit much. All Might said to the boy that was hanging onto his leg. I can't let go now, otherwise I'll die. Izuku screamed. Oh right. All Might then felt a trickle of blood slip from his mouth while in the air. He mentally cursed to himself knowing that he had to get somewhere private soon. To say that Kitsuki Bakugo was confused would have been an understatement. He was sure that he was going to be expelled the moment the principal's threat left his lips. After the principal had dismissed him, he hovered around the door to listen to the rest of the conversation. Never did he anticipate that Izuku would cover for him. The only question left was exactly why he did. It couldn't have been out of fear considering that he was more than capable of defending himself, and additionally he showed no hesitation when needed to do so. Could it be that he was trying to blackmail him in some way? Kitsuki quickly dismissed that idea considering that he wasn't the type to blackmail, and if he was, he wouldn't have gained anything out of it. Not many things left Kitsuki stumped, but in this instance he couldn't conceive any possible answer. The voice of one of his lackeys snapped him out of his thoughts. You've been pretty quiet, Bakugo. Did the nerd get you in trouble? And if he did, what did you get hit with? Detention? Suspension? The voice of the other lackey rang out. Bakugo continued walking, not bothering to look back. The nerd didn't get me in trouble. I'm pretty damn fortunate because my ass would have been expelled if he decided to spill. Deku didn't rat you out, well I'll be damned. I for sure thought you were toast. I wonder why he didn't say anything. The quirkless loser probably was afraid of the beating Bakugo would have given him if he said anything. Ha. You're probably right. As the two lackeys stayed engaged in conversation, Kitsuki began to tune them out. Quite frankly, he couldn't care less that they were present. He would have preferred to just walk home by himself to reflect on what happened that day. Due to being so immersed in his thoughts, Kitsuki failed to notice the giant brown blob that hovered in front of him. He heard screams and the sound of footsteps, and afterwards he immediately felt pain. Can someone without a quirk become a hero like you? Izuku looked to All Might with a desperate and pleading look in his eyes. He was desperate for a response, and he was pleading that the answer to his question would be a resounding yes. Many have picked on me because I'm quirkless, and maybe that's why I think saving someone is the coolest thing you can do. I want to be like you, saving people with a fearless smile. Izuku suddenly screamed as All Might had been replaced with a man that looked extremely malnourished. Who are you? You're not All Might, you're a fake. All Might has never been this thin and scrawny. Izuku squawked. I am All Might. Izuku screamed as the man started to cough up blood. No way, this can't possibly be you. Relax, young man, I assure you I am All Might. You know how people suck in their gut at the pool. My situation is similar. What you're seeing is the real me, but don't write about it on the internet, okay? All Might then lifted his shirt and revealed a nasty looking scar. The sight of it made Izuku queasy, however he did his best to calm himself down for what All Might was about to tell him. 5 years ago, a foe did this to me. Because of that fight my respiratory system was nearly destroyed and my stomach had to be removed. The after effects of those surgeries have caused me to wither away and now I'm limited to about 3 hours of hero work a day. 5 years ago? Was that when you fought Toxic Chainsaw? Izuku asked. Ah, you know your stuff, young man. But no, my battle with Toxic Chainsaw was not responsible for these injuries. Someone of Toxic Chainsaw's caliber could never do this to me. The battle that caused these injuries were never made public because I requested so. That way the smile of the symbol of peace could remain unwavering. And the smile that you see is not one of fearlessness, rather it's to stave off the overcoming pressure that I feel. As far as whether you can become a hero, a pro must have the desire to serve and protect, however behind that desire there needs to be power. If there is no power, one can't adequately fulfill his role as a protector. Izuku had expected that response, but he nonetheless felt crushed. Even the #1 pro hero had told him that he couldn't become a hero without a quirk. He felt his eyes start to water at the realization that the years of hard work and dedication he put into his pursuit of becoming a hero were useless. All Might continued to speak. If you have the desire to help others, why not strive to become a police officer? One of my closest friends is a detective and I have nothing but the utmost respect for him. Young man, it's not wrong to dream, but you have to be realistic in your expectations. All Might then left, leaving an emotional Izuku on the roof. He knew that All Might didn't mean any harm with what he said, but it still stung. He had essentially dedicated his whole life to being a hero. He had trained, read everything to know regarding quirk usage laws, he had studied every quirk he'd seen, and he maintained a 3.9 GPA so that he could qualify to get into UA. To be told that still wasn't enough was frustrating. And for something that was beyond his control being the hindrance in his plans of becoming a hero made him all the more upset. After holding back the tears for so long he slumped to his knees and sobbed bitterly. Izuku made his way back home feeling utterly disappointed and emotionally drained. He reflected on the words All Might had spoken to him earlier as he walked. All Might was right, it was time for him to be realistic. The incident with the sludge villain had proven to be more than enough evidence of the fact that without a quirk, Izuku was underqualified to be a hero. He still wanted to help people, so he set himself a new goal. He would try to become an officer just as All Might suggested. Granted, the position didn't come with all the glamour, nor respect the job of a hero, but nevertheless it was still an avenue for him to make a real change. Izuku continued on his way home until he noticed a crowd starting to gather. He made his way over to see what the source of the commotion was, however what he saw made him widen his eyes in horror. The same villain that had tried to take over his body earlier was making a second attempt on another individual. Izuku then came to the realization that he was responsible for the villain escaping due to him distracting All Might. He heard murmurs amongst the crowd, some questioning the present hero's hesitance in helping the victim, while others were openly scrutinizing All Might for having not arrived. He felt an overwhelming sense of guilt because he knew that he was to blame. He made his way past the crowd to get a good look of just who the sludge villain was trying to take over, and he saw an unmistakable set of sandy blonde hair and a pair of piercing red eyes. However, the eyes that usually held confidence were now filled with an overwhelming amount of fear. Izuku ran towards the villain despite the protest of the pro-heroes and civilians present. He didn't see Bakugo the bully, nor did he see Kachin, his childhood friend. What he saw was a citizen that was in peril, and without thinking he was rushing in to save that individual. He threw his backpack at the villain desperate to try and inflict some type of damage upon him. It goes without saying that the attack proved to be futile. Having realized that he closed in on the villain and started trying to pry Katsuki from the sludge. "Deku, are you crazy? Why the hell are you here?" the blonde teen exclaimed. "I don't know, my body just kinda started moving on its own. Also it looked like you needed saving," Izuku said with a forced smile on his face. Katsuki then felt himself involuntarily relinquish his body towards the fiendish villain. The blob of slime, having been fed up with the kid, decided that enough was enough. He raised his arm preparing to strike Izuku. He braced himself as he saw his impending end. He was cornered, and there was no way possible for him to escape. He hung his head as he awaited the finishing blow. However, the blow never landed. Both Katsuki and the villain's eyes widened as they witnessed Izuku seemingly dodge the killing strike at the last second. Not to mention that he had done so with relative ease. Angered, the villain took another swing at Izuku, attempting to decapitate him with the blow. Izuku again dodged at the last second, leaning his body backwards to avoid the hit. As Izuku rose back up, Katsuki noticed something strange. The bright green eyes that he normally had were now replaced by luminescent azure ones. Not to mention the look of panic that was held by Izuku prior had now been replaced by a stone-cold stare. The villain took a step back. The overwhelming pressure that was now being emitted from the boy had caused the air to become very thick. Losing all sense of rationale, the sludge villain threw a flurry of attacks at Izuku, hoping to hit him. The boy simply dodged all the attacks as he drew nearer to the brown pile of sludge. Growing desperate, the villain emitted a full-powered point-blank explosion once Izuku was in range. He couldn't help but smirk knowing that the green-haired boy couldn't have possibly dodged that. However, the untouched frame of Izuku emerging from the smoke had proved him wrong. Izuku then leapt up towards the villain. The fiend tried to strike Izuku while he was in mid-air, but he easily dodged the blow, and he then landed a solid knee to the exposed eye of the slime criminal. The villain roared in agony, and as a result the grasp he had on Kitsuki's body slipped. Seizing the opportunity, Kitsuki squirmed out of the villain's hold and scrambled away. He heard the villain yelp again as Izuku struck him in the eye again. Kitsuki could only gawk in amazement and confusion on what he was witnessing. The quiet, timid Izuku he had known had been replaced with one that radiated confidence and composure. However, the personality change wasn't the only thing that surprised him. The fact that Izuku had a quirk was what really threw him for a loop. Has the damn nerd always had a quirk? Kitsuki wondered. However, a bigger question started to plague his mind: why do I feel that I've seen this before? The 10-year-old Izuku Midoryia was surrounded by Kitsuki and his posse. Earlier that day at school, Izuku had stood up for a boy Kitsuki was picking on and called him out for it. Not wanting to let the slight against him go unpunished, Kitsuki decided to trail Izuku home and ambush him when he was most vulnerable. When the time came, Kitsuki and his lackeys rushed Izuku, throwing a flurry of punches, elbows, and kicks at him. A couple of minutes later, Izuku was still standing, however blood was trickling down his face as a result of all the blows that had landed. Back up extras. I want to be the one who delivers the knockout punch, Kitsuki exclaimed. He grinned like a maniac as he went in to finish the fight. His eyes grew wide with anticipation as the punch was literally moments from impact. Kitsuki's grin quickly disappeared as Izuku dodged and countered with a brutal uppercut to the stomach. The momentum from Kitsuki's punch only furthered the impact, and he felt his breath leave him. He looked up and for a moment could have sworn he saw a glint of silver in the boy's eyes, but they quickly shifted back to their normal green, and Izuku collapsed to the ground. Kitsuki held his stomach, as it was still tender from the punch he just received. Akugu, are you okay? That punch looked like it hurt, one of his lackeys asked. The punch that worthless Deku threw barely tickled. It was only beginner's luck that he hit me, Kitsuki exclaimed. However, behind the mask of bravado, Kitsuki knew he was lying. Not only did the punch carry a lot of force, but the dodge that he pulled off was perfectly timed. To do something like that, one would need almost inhuman reflexes. However, this was just one incident. In all the other encounters he had with Izuku, he had never done anything of that magnitude. Plus Izuku himself had told him that he was quirkless. Kitsuki narrowed his eyes at the downed form of the green-haired boy. Eventually, he walked off incidentally, deciding not to give the matter further thought. The way Deku is fighting now is like how he did 4 years ago. So that means the damn nerd had a quirk all this time. Why the hell has he been hiding it? Kitsuki was internalizing everything as Izuku continued to fight the sludge monster. At this point, the villain was throwing wild swings as he couldn't see out of either eye. The sludge villain swung downwards, but Izuku parried his arm and then delivered a precise chop to the limb, effectively removing it. The villain started to fume in anger at the display and made another futile swing to hit Izuku. As a result, the other limb the villain had was dismembered. Izuku's eyes flashed green then back to azure briefly as he leapt into the air, intent on delivering a kick that would decapitate the villain. The villain was helpless as he knew the finishing blow was bound to strike in a matter of seconds. However, instead of decapitating the fiend, the kick had simply thudded against the slimy mass. The azure color in Izuku's eyes had disappeared, and a wave of exhaustion then struck the boy. Izuku fell to his knees as he gasped for breath. His muscles ached and he couldn't find the energy in himself to even scream for help. The villain, forcing an eye open, had approached him with a wicked grin on his face. Having regained his limbs, he raised an arm excited to finally put an end to the green-haired teen. The limb was caught by a man he had encountered earlier. The man with the unwavering smile, All Might, had made his way onto the scene. All Might reared his fist back and threw his signature Detroit Smash attack. The force of the punch scattered the villain's body to various areas in the vicinity and additionally had changed the weather as well. The crowd present cheered as All Might once again swooped in to do what he always did, save the day. Needless to say, the pro heroes that were present were furious that Izuku had recklessly rushed in to save Kitsuki. However, most present didn't do a good job of masking the amazement they had of seeing his quirk in action. One hero in particular who had made her debut that day had approached Izuku to give him praise. Despite acting like a dumb ass, I have to say that I'm impressed with what I saw. With that quirk you have real potential to become a great hero. To add on to what Mountain Lady is saying, it's evident you have a lot of potential, kid. However, in situations like these please leave it to the pros. Had you had a weaker quirk, or had you been quirkless, the situation could have ended a lot worse. Even with the quirk you had, things were starting to get dicey," said Kamui Woods, another rising hero. "Not to mention, it would have been a shame if a boy as cute as you ended up dying," Mountain Lady said as she gave Izuku a teasing wink. Izuku blushed vehemently at the praise he was receiving, whereas Katsuki watched the situation from afar as he seethed in anger. Part of Katsuki was angry that the damn nerd was receiving a lot more attention than he was. He was the victim and had fought valiantly against the villain from taking over his body. All Izuku managed to do was get in a couple of blows and get in the way. So the fact that everybody was praising Izuku like he was the second coming of All Might infuriated him. However, Katsuki was also angry with himself. Once he got away from the villain, he never went to help Izuku. "It was because you were scared." Katsuki tried to deny this thought, but he couldn't. The fact that he almost died during the encounter made him scared. It made him feel vulnerable and contrasted everything people had said about him. He was told many times that he was special, but to be defeated by a no-name villain so easily was humiliating. Katsuki looked around to find that Izuku had already started walking off from the scene. He wasn't far ahead, so he started to jog to catch up to him. He had questions for the boy, and he would be damned if he didn't get answers for them that day. "Hopefully, I don't get caught up in anything else. My mom is probably worried sick about me," Izuku thought as he made his way home. A lot had happened to him that day, and he needed time to process it. He had been sent to the principal's office, attacked by a villain, saved by All Might, fought a villain, after awakening his quirk, saved by All Might again, and had been called cute by the pro-hero Mountain Lady. Izuku still couldn't fathom the fact that he had a quirk all this time, and the fact that pros had said it was a powerful quirk boggled his mind even further. All Might had said that in order to serve as a protector, one had to have not only the desire but the power to do so. Since Izuku had both, he still had a chance to make his dream of becoming a hero a reality. He smiled to himself as he held his notebook firmly to his chest. Even though his day had its ups and downs, in the end everything had managed to work out. As he continued down the street, he heard a voice call out his dreaded nickname. "Deku." Izuku turned around and saw the form of Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki had his head hung low, different from how it was normally hung with pride. "I just wanted to let you know that you didn't save me, All Might did. Plus, I didn't need your damn help anyway. I could have escaped the sludge bastard anytime I wanted to," Katsuki exclaimed. Izuku sighed deeply at the statement. It seemed like a typical thing for him to say. "Also, do you get your kicks and giggles playing me for a fool?" Izuku hung his head in confusion at what Katsuki was asking him. "Don't give me that clueless look. I know that you've been hiding your quirk from me. Did you enjoy using the opportunity to save me as a way to show how much better you are? Well, I hope so, because that'll make it all the more sweet when I get the chance to crush you." Izuku could only look disappointed at what Katsuki was suggesting. Did Katsuki really think that he was petty enough to bring personal vendettas in a situation that involved life and death? Anxious to clear the air, Izuku responded, "Kachin, I rushed in to try and save you, not to show that I'm better than you, but because you needed the help. Had it been anyone else in your position, I would have rushed in the same way." Katsuki rolled his eyes at the response. He expected that answer from Izuku, however, just because he expected the answer, it didn't entitle him to believe it. Admitted Deku. "You just want to play savior, so that you can have something to laud over me with. Why else would you have avoided squealing on me earlier?" Izuku's eyes grew as large as saucers. How did YUKN? "After the principal dismissed me, I hovered around the door to listen in. Imagine my surprise when you decided to remain silent despite the chances the principal gave you to rat me out. While you may have fooled everyone with your self-righteous act, you aren't fooling me," Katsuki exclaimed. Izuku knew that if he tried to defend himself it would be fruitless. However, he at least wanted to give it a shot. He took a deep breath to calm his nerves and responded, "Kachin, you don't understand how difficult it was for me to make that decision. You quite frankly have made my life a living hell. For whatever reason, you decide to pick on me despite the fact that I just genuinely want to be friends with you. To be degraded on an everyday basis gets disheartening. What's worse is the fact that not only you do it, but you encourage others to do it as well. There's been times where I have contemplated ending it all but realized how unfair it would be to my mom." Katsuki flinched at the last sentence that was spoken. He knew he treated Izuku harshly, but driving him to the point of suicidal thoughts. The behavior seemed unbefitting for a hero, and Katsuki knew this. He tried to rationalize that Izuku wouldn't have the will to take his own life, however, what if he did? Could he live with the guilt of knowing that he drove his former best friend to end his own life? Could he look the mother in the face and tell her that he was the reason for her son abandoning her? Izuku continued to speak as Katsuki was entrapped in his thoughts. You as well as myself know that the abuse isn't just limited mentally. Izuku rolled up his sleeve which showed a variety of burn marks. These marks are a result of your harassment, and there's plenty more hidden away as you are aware. In all honesty, you deserve to get expelled. Not just for what you have done to me but what you have done to others as well. Izuku was surprised to see a look of shame cross Katsuki's face. He had been expecting Katsuki to try and justify his actions, but instead the red-eyed teen had sat and listened. Kachin, even though you have messed up, I believe that you still have the potential to become a great hero. Katsuki raised his head and met Izuku's eyes. It was obvious that he was genuine in what he was saying. I believe that you will become a great hero, not just because you have a strong quirk, but because you are the hardest worker I know. My decision to start training despite my quirk despite not being active yet was inspired by you. I know what it's like to be told that your hard work and dedication won't pay off. However, in my case it was because of a situation I couldn't control. As for you Kachin, the decision to let your hard work go in vain rests squarely on your shoulders. I just wanted to give you a second chance before you made a decision that would permanently impact your life. Izuku refused to tell him the embarrassing secondary reason. An awkward silence ensued as Katsuki was processing everything that was said to him and as Izuku was awaiting a response. After having some time to formulate a response, Katsuki spoke. "TCH whatever, your sappy story won't get me to prostrate myself before you, if that's what you want." Izuku gave a deadpan expression at Katsuki's rebuttal. Maybe the idea to not get him expelled was stupid. As Katsuki started to walk off, he turned around and met Izuku's gaze. "But Deku, you may not be as worthless as I thought you were." The tone in his voice was neither malicious nor patronizing. Izuku could only gawk. Even though it wasn't the words "I'm sorry" for Katsuki, it was pretty damn close. Katsuki noticed Izuku's stare and snapped. "Boy nerd, quit staring at me with that dopey look. Don't you have any manners? You know it's pretty damn creepy to just gaze at someone." Izuku blushed at the realization that he was indeed staring at him. Katsuki on the other hand kept speaking. "Now that you have a powerful quirk to go alongside that damn brain of yours, I'm sure that I'll be seeing you at UA. However, don't let today go to your head. I will become the #1 hero, and I'll crush you like a bug if you get in my way." Izuku smiled. "I wouldn't want to have it any other way," he thought. Katsuki, having said his piece, started on his way home with his bag slung over his shoulder. As Izuku turned around to leave, he was startled by a voice ringing out the words, "I am here." Izuku gasped as he saw All Might standing a few feet away from him. "All Might, why are you here? How did you get past all those reporters?" "I stand for justice, not sound bites, because I am All Might." Izuku shrieked as All Might once again started hacking up globs of blood. All Might now stood in front of him in his weakened form. "Kid, I've come to apologize about what I said to you earlier, and also I have a proposal for you. But first things first, you told me that you were quirkless, yet what you did to that villain says otherwise. Care to explain?" "Well, I thought I was quirkless. This was the first time I can recall something like that happening to me." Izuku stammered. "So it must have been a case of your quirk being dormant." "Well, cases like this are rare, they do exist. Most who do have a dormant quirk often live the rest of their lives without knowing they have one. Regarding dormant quirks, it's often circumstantial on how they're triggered. For some it's based on emotions, while for others it's based on different substances such as food, medicine, so on and so forth. The fact that you were oblivious to having a quirk makes what you did all the more admirable." "Well, I wouldn't say that, since I was the one to cause the situation in the first place," responded Izuku with a sheepish look. "No, young man, the praise is warranted. Of all the people at the scene, the person to respond was you, a timid and quirkless boy. It was because of you that I was spurred into action. Most top heroes show signs of greatness even as children. Many of them claimed that their bodies could move before they could think. I don't need you to confirm to me that's what happened to you. I already know. Young man, what I said to you on the roof was wrong. You can become a hero." Izuku broke down and started to cry tears of joy. After the sludge villain event, many of the pros praised him, but Izuku knew that it was in admiration of his quirk and not necessarily his decision to try and rescue Katsuki. However, to be told by his idol that he merely didn't just have the quirk to become a hero, but also the spirit to become one made him overwhelmed with emotion. For the longest time, everyone he knew had never believed that he could achieve his dream of being a hero. Even his own mother hadn't believed in him. The day he was diagnosed to be quirkless, he tearfully asked his mother if it was still possible for him to become a hero. Instead of telling him yes, she told him "I'm sorry" as she held him close, trying to console him. Izuku didn't hold it against his mother, as she was still an overwhelmingly positive influence in his life, but those words didn't sting any less. "Now it's time to get to the proposal," All Might said, getting the attention of a tearful Izuku. "I want to make you my successor, and I believe you, young man, are worthy of inheriting my power." "Wait, what? Izuku was speechless by what All Might was proposing. All Might couldn't help but laugh upon seeing the expression on Izuku's face. What's with the long face? This is a legitimate proposal. Young man, I want you to accept my power, that is if you want to. What does he mean? Accept his power? Izuku pondered. All Might saw the confused look on Izuku's face and went on to explain what he meant. This concerns my quirk, kid. Many tabloids and blogs have speculated that my quirk is some type of physical enhancer. In interviews I often dismiss the question, using jokes as a way to inadvertently change the subject. I do this so that the persona of All Might comes off as a natural-born hero. You see, kid, my power is anything but natural. My quirk was passed down to me like the Olympic torch. Passed down to you, are you serious? Izuku questioned. Indeed I am, young man, and if you accept my proposal I intend to pass it down to you. Wait, hold on a sec. Naturally a concept of this magnitude would be above my comprehension. Even with the knowledge we have now there is still so little we know about quirks and how they operate. Furthermore, if a theory such as what All Might is proposing is right, that changes the very foundation of what we believed quirks to be. Research has shown that a quirk is a power or characteristic that is exclusive to one individual. But that being said, if a quirk can be passed down, does that mean that All Might's quirk is an anomaly, or are there others that possess this characteristic? If so, which type of quirks could possess the characteristic of being transferable? This is also bizarre. All Might's quirk is one of the 7 great mysteries of the world, and as far as I'm aware I haven't heard a hypothesis like the one All Might proposed from any of the quirk researchers I know of. But he himself is saying that his quirk was passed down to him. Just how is this possible? Kid, relax. Take a breather. Do you really doubt me that much? The question snapped Izuku out of his muttering. I may have secrets, but I never lie. The ability I have that allows me to transfer my power is called One for All. On for All. It's a quirk that stockpiles power as it's passed on. Each time it's passed on the quirk refines itself. Explained All Might. But why me? Izuku asked. Young man, you should already know the answer to that question. I've been searching for a successor for a long time, and I believe you are worthy. Even though you had no knowledge that your quirk would activate in that fight, you still bravely rushed in to save that young man. I am positive that you'll be a fine successor, however the choice ultimately rests in your hands. So young man, what do you say? Izuku rose, rubbing his eyes with his jacket sleeve to wipe away the tears. His eyes were brimming with determination and had a look of resolve to match. Yes, he accept. All Might met his look of resolve with a smirk. A quick answer, can't say I expected anything less. Once Izuku finally arrived home, his mother met him at the door. She wrapped him in a giant hug, and inevitably the tears started to fall. My baby. I saw what happened on the news. I was so scared when I saw you run off to confront that awful creature. I'm glad that you were able to save Bakugo, but please don't make it a habit to act so reckless. There's only so much my little old heart can take. Inko exclaimed as she firmly held her son. Izuku's eyes started to water as well because he felt guilty making his mother so worried. He stood there, relishing in the warmth his mother provided. After finding his voice, he pulled back from the embrace and told his mother, I promise I won't make it a habit. I just couldn't stand there while Kachin was on the verge of dying. But mom, I wish you could understand how I felt. After the fight a bunch of the pros scolded me for rushing in the way I did, but one in particular told me I acted like a hero, and he made me feel like it. That feeling is something that I want to keep on experiencing, and now that I have a quirk it's possible for me too. Inko smiled sadly at her son. From the time that he was little it was no secret to her that he wanted to become a hero. After Izuku was pronounced quirkless by the doctor, a part of her felt a bit relieved at the news. She was aware of the dangers that came with being a hero, and truthfully she wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of her son becoming a hero. She knew that even after her son was pronounced quirkless he still had the desire to be a hero, but she wasn't necessarily worried because she figured that he would eventually grow out of that dream. Never did she anticipate that he would suddenly manifest a quirk and as a byproduct grab the attention of some pro-heroes. The path of peace was slowly becoming less of an option for him, and now it was looking that the path he was taking would be painted in crimson. Inko suspected that her son was probably ecstatic that he manifested a quirk, and that coupled with his heroic personality made his dream all the more attainable. She was happy at the thought of her son being content. It had been a long time since she had seen her son genuinely happy. However, the heroic personality that Inko admired was something she also feared because she knew that it had the capability of getting him hurt or worse. Inko, realizing her mind was starting to trail off, redirected her train of thought to another matter that was concerning her. Speaking of Bakugo, your principal called me today. He told me that you and him got into a fight. What was that about? Izuku gulped. He knew lying would only make the situation worse. However, he had no desire to cause his mom further distress. She was already freaked out enough about the slime villain incident, and telling his mom that the fight was a result of bullying would only cause her to worry more. In addition, he essentially promised Katsuki another chance to better himself, and he was resolved to keep his word. Kachin and I got into an argument earlier that day. He confronted me as I was about to leave for the day, and I attacked him because I was irritated. Inko frowned. What her son described sounded nothing like him. Izuku was a fairly patient boy and had always been a bit more on the passive side. The idea of him starting the fight was an alien idea to her. Izuku, you're not lying to me, are you? This sounds nothing like you. Izuku shook his head. I started to fight. I felt he had insulted me before, and I had no intention of talking to him. It was a lapse of judgment on my part. I'm sorry I caused so much trouble. Are you covering for Bakugo? Izuku was on the verge of expressing his surprise, but reined in as to not alert his mother. Lying to his mother was hard, but he had years of practice to know just what to do. He hung his head in mock confusion at the question his mother posed. The principal told me that he suspected that you were being bullied, and by Bakugo no less. Izuku, is that true? Is Bakugo bullying you? Izuku did his best to be as convincing as possible with his response. Mom, Kachin is not bullying me. Him and I are good friends. We've been good friends since we were kids, and I intend for it to stay that way. It was just today, he and I had a disagreement. It happens. Inko stroked her son's face. She felt the lumps of his bruises as she brushed her hand down his cheek. Izuku hissed in pain as she did so. Inko at one point was young too, and while it was true that sometimes friends got into fights, these types of injuries aren't ones a friend leaves, Inko thought. However, it seemed that Izuku was genuine in what he was saying, and she currently had no evidence to prove otherwise, so she went against her gut and chose to believe him. Inko let loose a deep sigh. Izuku, as you can imagine, I am not pleased with what I heard. You are going to receive the punishment, however I won't decide what it will be tonight. I'm just glad you made it home safe and sound. Go ahead and wash up, I'm going to get started on dinner. Izuku nodded in confirmation and proceeded to the bathroom to take a shower. He felt awful lying to his mother like that, but he had made a promise and was intent on keeping it. Katsuki made his way to his front door. A lot had happened to him that day, and he hoped that his mother wouldn't give him too much of a problem. All he wanted to do was go to his room and sleep off the hell we went through. Alas, his hopes were dashed to pieces as soon as his mother caught sight of him as he stepped through the door. A couple of seconds later, screaming had filled the Bakugo household. "Damn it, kid, why the hell can't you stay out of trouble for one day?" yelled a lady with spiky blonde hair and red eyes. "The old hag. I almost die, and that's the first thing you ask," shouted Katsuki. "Katsuki and Mitsuki, please let's just try to calm down." "Shut the hell up, Miseru," Mitsuki exclaimed. "Yeah, no one asked for your opinion, old man. Don't speak to your father that way, you damn brat. Don't tell me what to do, you damn relic." The glasses-wearing brunette slumped his shoulders in defeat. When his wife and son got into screaming matches like this, they could last hours. He had hoped to maintain a semblance of peace once Katsuki stepped through the door, but the angry glare his wife had told him that his efforts would be in vain. In situations like these, all he could do was wait them out. The heated dispute between mother and son finally ended with Katsuki announcing that he was going to his room and that he wanted to be left alone. He stomped up the stairs and gave his door a hard slam once he was inside. Downstairs, his mother had screamed his ear off about his fight with Izuku and his encounter with a sludge villain. She vividly expressed her distaste at Katsuki starting a fight with Izuku of all people, and she scolded him on how he needed to do a better job watching what he says and controlling his temper. Katsuki found it ironic that his mother was the one giving him such counsel, but he decided not to voice the hypocrisy. What he wanted more than anything was to rest. As Katsuki lay sprawled out on his bed, his mind started to cycle through the events that transpired that day. Truth be told, his encounter with the sludge villain wasn't what was bothering him the most. He had been humiliated that he was saved by Izuku of all people, but at the end of the day he had managed to come out the event unscathed for the most part. He would simply get stronger so as to not end up in a similar situation. What he couldn't get his mind off was his encounter with Izuku after the incident. Izuku had told him that he wanted to be friends with him, but in all honesty he didn't care. A lot of people wanted to be friends with him, but Katsuki held the belief that the path to the top was built on resolve and talent, not handshakes and high fives. Katsuki was surprised to find out that Izuku thought highly of him, not because of his quirk, but for who he was. He figured that the quirk-obsessed nerd praised him because of his power, but to find out that Izuku respected him because of his work ethic was a shocker. Many that hung around him only did so because of the quirk he had and hoped that once he became a pro, he would share the fruits of his labor with them. He knew this, and as a result it made it difficult for him to trust people. However, what really had Kitsuki hung up was the fact that Izuku had said he was the reason he contemplated suicide a couple of times. Kitsuki initially wanted to say that he wasn't responsible for his weak resolve until he realized that he was. For the longest time he had despised Izuku because he figured that Izuku thought that he was better than him. The birth of this notion came about 10 years ago. That day Kitsuki had fallen into a river, and to say the least he had been embarrassed by it. In the eyes of himself and many in his age group, he seemed nigh invincible, so to see him get into an accident like that was almost surreal. The embarrassment Kitsuki had was driven further when a 4-year-old quirkless Izuku Midoryia trudged his way into the river and offered him a hand. Kitsuki perceived the action as Izuku looking down on him, and from then on made it his mission to remind Izuku that he was under him in every aspect. Whenever Kitsuki would receive a higher score on a test than Izuku, he would go out of his way to rub it in his face and then insinuate that he had low intelligence. When it came to sports, Kitsuki would single out Izuku and then crush him to display his dominance. Then when it came to his fights with Izuku, even when the green-haired teen was down for the count, Kitsuki would use his quirk to brand Izuku with marks to remind Izuku of the consequences of standing up to him. Despite the tears and the pleas, Kitsuki would grip his skin firmly and burn him, unfazed by the screams of agony. He gave an involuntary shudder. Reflecting on what he had done made Kitsuki realize just how horribly he treated Izuku. What made it worse was the fact that he realized he did it all for nothing. The misconception he had of Izuku was proven false the moment he confronted him after the sludge incident. For 10 long years, Kitsuki had put Izuku through unwarranted torment, abuse, and had even driven him to suicidal thoughts based on a notion that wasn't true. Grasping the weight of what he'd done made him feel nauseous, and he started to feel clammy. His heart threatened to beat its way out of his chest, and he started to feel like he couldn't breathe. Kitsuki trembled violently, and he could feel shivers running down his body. He sat up in an attempt to capture his breath, but at this point he was hyperventilating, unable to get his nerves under control. His mother knocked on the door to check on him and also to apologize for earlier. After not getting a response, Mitsuki opened the door to find that her son was shaking uncontrollably and beads of sweat were running down Kitsuki's form. Mitsuki, realizing her son was having a panic attack, rushed over to his side and threw her arms around him. She stroked his hair and spoke to him in a soothing tone that she rarely used. His breathing slowly started to return to normal as she shushed him and assured him that everything would be fine. A headache made its way present as his panic attack started to cease. He buried his face into her chest, his face wet with not only sweat but some tears as well. They held each other like this for a while. Having sensed that her son had calmed down a bit, she released her son from her embrace and asked him what caused him to have a reaction like that. The question only made Kitsuki start to cry again. However, he forced himself to tell his mother the real reason the fight had started, how he had been bullying Izuku for the past 10 years, and how Izuku had contemplated suicide as a result. His mother's face remained unreadable as she listened. After Kitsuki had finished speaking, a sharp smack resonated throughout the room. Shock was painted on his face at the realization that his mother had slapped him. While his mother was indeed hot-headed, she had never resorted to physical violence with him. So the fact that she had in that instance was a telling sign of just how angry she was with him. Expecting his mother to start yelling, she instead started to break down into tears. "Goddamn it, kid, what the hell am I going to do with you?" she asked in a broken voice. Kitsuki could recall on one hand how many times he'd seen his mother cry, and the fact that he was responsible for this time made him feel horrible. It also made him realize that the consequences of his actions didn't just affect him, they also affected his loved ones. He could only look on in silence as his mother continued to weep. Eventually finding the strength to talk, she said, "Kitsuki, you are pretty damn lucky, that boy has a heart of gold. I don't think anyone else would have bothered to look for the potential in you after what you did. Hell, I don't even know if I would have had I found out through the school what you've been doing." Kitsuki felt crushed by the words his mother had spoken to him. Even his mother had doubts about whether or not he was a lost cause. Noticing that his gaze was drifting off, Mitsuki told her son, "Kitsuki, look at me. The fact that you even told me about this situation lets me know that you at least see the need to change. But understand this, Kitsuki, seeing the need to change and actually doing so are two separate things. You're a hard worker and I know that you are more than capable of changing, but you can't afford to put it off. You were essentially given a second opportunity, so don't be a dumbass and squander it." Mitsuki rose from her son's bed and started to leave. As she opened his door to exit, she said, "I will discuss what you told me with your father. Know that you will be punished. With that being said, I believe in you, Kitsuki. It's just a matter of you believing in yourself." With those words she left the room, leaving an emotional Kitsuki to reflect on the words his mother had spoken to him. 2 days after the sludge villain incident, Izuku had met up with All Might at Takoba Municipal Beach to begin his training. At the moment he was currently dragging a refrigerator with All Might sitting on top of it. Due to the training Izuku had done prior, he was able to make a little bit of progress slowly but surely pulling the refrigerator. After having moved the refrigerator a couple of meters, Izuku fell on his knees, exhaustion starting to take over. Could you tell me why I'm dragging all this garbage across the beach? Izuku questioned in between breaths. It's to train your body. Fortunately, you don't have as much work to do as I originally anticipated. Originally, I was under the impression that you were skin and bones, but apparently you have a decent amount of muscle hidden away. It's just important that you are conditioned well enough so that you can use one for all. Otherwise, we run the risk of your limbs popping off. All Might explained. Is that the only reason why I'm hauling all this trash around? Not quite. You see, young man, I wanted to use your training as an opportunity to restore this section of the beach to its former glory. If you didn't know, this part of the beach has been like this for years. Matter of fact, I did know that. I read that the currents were responsible for depositing most of the trash on the shore. The other problem is that people dump their garbage here even though they are not supposed to. That is correct, and by picking up this trash this will mark your start as a hero. You see, young man, community service is just as important as saving a civilian or defeating a villain. However, this message seems to have been lost amongst the newer generation of heroes. I hope to instill a value of community service within you so that you can be more well-rounded as a hero. Okay, that makes sense. I'm glad you understand, young man. With that being said, I assume that you are applying to the UA, correct? I am, and I desperately hope to pass the entrance exam. That way I can go to the same school you did, All Might. Disregarding the fact that your idolization of me is borderline scary, I hope to see you pass as well. However, the entrance exam at UA is no joke, which is why I created this, All Might said as he held up a folder that was brimming with papers. What is that? Izuku asked as he took the folder from All Might's hand. That, young man, is my self-defined pass the test, American Dream Plan. Within it you'll find a training regimen to help you clean up the garbage as well as dietary plans to help you build muscle. Wow, you even have a plan for how much I sleep. Indeed, young man. Truth be told, I made that plan with the idea that it would take the full 10 months for you to clean up the beach. Seeing the state that your body is in right now, I think if you work diligently you can probably do it in 8. If that's the case, what will I do for the last 2 months? All Might rubbed his chin as he thought about the answer to the boy's question. After having some moments to think, an idea finally popped up in his head. We will use the 2 remaining months for you to train with one for all. Additionally, since you just recently discovered the existence of your quirk, we will use that time for you to train with that quirk as well. Speaking of which, have you figured out a name for your power? I have. I've decided the name of my quirk to be Autonomous Movement, Izuku said with a smile on his face. What? Izuku questioned as All Might continued to stand there in silence. Oh, it's nothing important, young man. I just thought that the name of your quirk would be a bit cooler. What do you mean? What's not cool about it? To be honest, the name is rather generic. How's it generic? It accurately describes what my quirk does and has a pretty nice ring to it, if I say so myself. You are entitled to your opinion, All Might said as he chuckled. But enough chit-chat, the beach isn't going to clean itself. 8 hellish and grueling months later, Izuku had finally finished cleaning the beach. The muscles he had prior to the training were now bigger and had a lot more definition. His face had become a bit more slender and defined as well. He stood shirtless on a heap of trash, his head held to the sky as he screamed in victory. All Might, witnessing this spectacle, couldn't help but stare in amazement and pride at his student. Oh my goodness. All Might exclaimed as he puffed into his muscular form. Izuku, delirious with exhaustion, fell off the heap he was standing on, but All Might had caught him before he hit the ground. All Might beamed seeing the progress his student had made, but his smile faded as he saw various burn marks on his pupil's body. He made a mental note of it and came to the decision to ask him about it later as he did not want to ruin the joyous occasion. Well done, young man. I couldn't be more proud. I did it, All Might really did. Indeed, your progress is nothing short of astonishing. Your example is quite motivational. Take a look, All Might said, holding his phone for Izuku to see. What's this? This is you 8 months ago. Truly remarkable work, young man. There is no doubt that you are now a suitable vessel. It feels like I cheated though. Getting all this help from you, I've been so blessed. Izuku responded, his voice breaking as tears ran down his face. He needs to have some more confidence in himself. His success has been on his own merit, All Might thought to himself. You need to stop being such a crybaby, but now it's time for the long-awaited awards ceremony. All Might plucked off a strand of hair off his head as he started to speak. You know what they say about success. There is a difference between being born with it and working your butt off to try and attain it. But that being said, there is no doubt in my mind that you have earned this power fair and square. He clenched his fist as he heard All Might speak. This would be a means for him to progress towards his dream of becoming a hero. His objective was almost in his grasp. Eat this, All Might said, holding a single strand of hair. Izuku thought he heard All Might wrong. He must have been going crazy, because he could have sworn he heard All Might tell him to eat the strand of hair he was holding. It really doesn't matter what you eat, as long as you get my DNA. I just chose hair, because I figured it was the lesser of many evils. Izuku backed up. He thought that All Might would place a hand on him to transfer the power, or would have him recite a pledge or something of that nature. However, this was a little more than he bargained for. All Might suspected that Izuku would try and escape, so he grabbed him before he could run away and then tried to shove the piece of hair in his mouth. All Might, stop. Don't put your hair in my mouth, Izuku screamed out in panic. Young man, stop that screaming. Don't you realize what you're saying can be taken out of context? All Might's fear was confirmed as a couple of passers-by heard the commotion. Their faces went white with fear and concern. You don't think, one said. All Might diddles with kids, the other finished. I hope not. I have a 3-year-old at home who's obsessed with All Might. It would break her little heart to know that her favorite hero would love to take her to his band. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. A man who smiles like that all the time is bound to be a creep. After much resistance from Izuku, All Might had finally gotten him to ingest the strand of hair. However, from that day on it was unknown to All Might why some parents would suddenly huddle their child close to their body whenever he would patrol. For the next couple of weeks, Izuku worked on mastering the basics of One for All. The first few times he tried to use it, he exerted way too much power, and that resulted in a few trips to All Might's personal doctor. Gradually, he started to learn how to better control the output of One for All. After getting a solid grasp of it, All Might introduced the concept of him spreading One for All across his body. Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.